initiatives, including a robust housing program, job creation, and infrastructural development, which will ultimately lead to a better quality of life for all Guyanese. Minister Teixeira added that Guyana has made several progressive strides with regard to laws relating to sections of the society such as women, children, and the LGBTQ community. She pointed out specifically that in August, laws against cross-dressing were removed as an offense against the state. Heading the delegation is the president of the National Bar Association of the United States of America, Carlos Moore. The visiting officials are also scheduled to meet with several other members of the government, members of the judiciary, and the Guyana Bar Association. The National Bar Association is the United States' oldest and largest national network of African American attorneys and judges. It was founded in 1925 and represents the interests of approximately 65,000 lawyers, judges, law professors, and law students. The visit comes against the background of repeated accusations by the mainly Afro-Guyanese-supported opposition of Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance for Change that the predominantly Indo-Guyanese-supported People's Progressive Party is practicing racial discrimination. Two Democratic congressmen earlier this year had called on the Irfan Ali-led government to be inclusive and to ensure adequate distribution of Guyana's wealth. The Guyana government has previously rejected those accusations. Police say they have destroyed $115 million worth of marijuana. The eradication exercise was carried out yesterday at Fort Nassau, Berbice River. No one has been arrested. Police say they destroyed 120,000 marijuana plants and 450 pounds of dried marijuana. The plants, ranging from 1 foot to 6 feet, were being grown on four farms. Police say another 450 pounds of marijuana were found in a drying area. They were all destroyed by fire. The National COVID Task Force has authorized the reopening of the Guyana-Brazil border crossing at Lethem in Region 9 from Mondays to Fridays. The NCTFF, in a release on Monday, said that the reopening of the border crossing from Monday to Friday takes immediate effect. Minister of Health Dr. Frank Anthony says the opening includes COVID measures to reduce the risk of transferring COVID.
This opening from Monday to Friday would allow for people to come across once they are able to produce their vaccination to show that they're fully vaccinated and that they have an antigen test or a PCR test that is negative. This is at all our border points. This is what we required, and at the border with Brazil, this is what we have put in place.
The crossing was closed more than a year ago following the COVID-19 outbreak there in March of 2020 and later restricted crossing to twice weekly. This had followed days of protests by Brazilians who had blocked trucks from leaving Bonfim in Brazil to come to Guyana to offload supplies. 2 winches for sluices at Nimes and Lagrange have been stolen, and the Ministry of Agriculture says it is worried that if there is a prolonged heavy rainfall, residents can experience floods. The government's Department of Public Information says officials believe that the winches were stolen during high tide because they're big and heavy and can only be removed by the Demerara River. Agriculture Minister Zulfikar Mustafa has warned that anyone caught tampering with the drainage structures will face the full force of the law. He says that surveillance has been heightened to prevent the theft of more sluice winches. Mr. Mustafa says the National Drainage and Irrigation Authority is taking steps to replace the winches that open and close the sluices. Police say one of their female off-duty ranks found a firearm in the compound of the National Insurance Scheme office in Linden. Police say the female rank was at the time leaving the NIS compound in the company of her daughter when the child stumbled on the suspected firearm, which was stuck partly in the earth. The incident took place around midday on Monday. The firearm was handed over to police. "20-year-old Daniel MacArthur, a security officer of South Vizsla's East Coast Amarara, has been jailed by Magistrate Dylan Bess. He appeared at the Spardam Magistrates Court. MacArthur, who was arrested last week at his home, where the firearm and live rounds were allegedly found, pleaded guilty on 2 counts of armed robberies and was sentenced to 2 years for each count. The sentence will run concurrently. The convict pleaded guilty to 1 count of illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition and not guilty to the other count of the same charge. He'll spend the next 3 years and 6 months in prison. MacArthur will return to court on December 5 for the continuation of the not guilty plea for illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. In the Caribbean, the head of the Leeward Islands Airlines Pilot Association is again appealing to Prime Minister Gaston Brown to request that the administrator of LIAT 1974 provide clarity regarding an October 8 meeting to discuss owed severance pay. Captain Patterson Thompson says in an Antigua Observer News report that the details of those talks will help trade unions and others make a decision on Brown's offer to pay up to 50% of the severance owed to ex-LIAT workers in cash, land, and government bonds. Captain Patterson Thompson says there were some issues in the offer that needed to be clarified that would possibly encourage more people to take another look at the offer. He says at the end of the day, it is the right of an individual to accept or reject the offer. Unions representing former LIAT workers rejected the offer earlier this year, saying it was not adequate. The Prime Minister over the weekend claimed that the unions continued to refuse the offer, which will not remain on the table indefinitely. He also spoke about other options the government is currently exploring. Prime Minister Brown says if the offer is accepted, the former workers can receive some financial support by Christmas. Mr. Brown says the government hopes to use part of an approved loan from the Caribbean Development Bank to bring some relief to the embattled workers. However, this depends on the union's willingness to settle. Drug maker Pfizer has signed a deal with a UN-backed group to allow other manufacturers to make its experimental COVID-19 pill. This move is seen as one that can make treatment available to more than half of the world's population. In a statement issued on Tuesday, Pfizer said it would grant a license for the antiviral pill to the Geneva-based medicines patent pool, which will let generic drug companies produce the pill for use in 95 countries, making up about 53% of the world's population. The deal excludes some large countries that have suffered devastating coronavirus outbreaks. While Brazilian drug companies could get a license to make the pill for export to other countries, the medicine could not be made generically for use in Brazil. A man said to be of great interest in the investigation into the murder of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse has been arrested in Turkey. According to the BBC Caribbean service, the businessman Samir Handel was detained at Istanbul airport while he was in transit from the United States to Jordan. He is alleged to have links to Christian Emmanuel Sanon, a Haitian doctor who was arrested in July in connection with Mr. Moïse's murder. In total, more than 40 suspects have been detained. Haiti's Foreign Minister Claude Joseph thanked his Turkish counterpart on Twitter for the arrest of Mr. Handel. Mr. Joseph did not give any details of the allegations against Mr. Handel, but Turkish authorities say they had acted because Interpol had issued an international arrest warrant for the businessman. Mr. Handel had reportedly been living in Miami in the U.S. prior to his arrest. It is not yet known why he was flying to Jordan. President Jovenel Moïse was shot dead on July 7 by gunmen who stormed his residence in the Haitian capital Port-au-Prince. Many of those in detention are former members of the Colombian military, many of whom say they were hired to provide security services in Haiti and were not told about a plan to kill the president. And now we go to the World Service of the BBC for the latest international news.
Hello, I'm David Harper with the BBC News. President Biden has told the Chinese leader Xi Jinping in a video conference that they both have a responsibility to ensure that relations between their two countries do not develop into open conflict. At the start of the conference, President Biden made this statement.
As I've said before, it seems to me our responsibility as leaders of China and the United States is to ensure that the competition between our countries does not veer into conflict, whether intended or unintended. Just simple, straightforward competition.
For his part, Mr. Xi said healthy relations between China and the United States were needed to face global challenges such as climate change and COVID-19. The two leaders are holding their most extensive talks since Mr. Biden became president, expected to focus on Taiwan, trade, Beijing's expanding nuclear arsenal, and the outcome of the COP summit. After months of negotiations, President Biden has signed into law a $1 trillion bill, which aims to boost America's decaying infrastructure. The law includes funding for roads, bridges, ports, electric vehicles and broadband connections. Speaking at the White House, Mr. Biden said that the bill would change American lives for the better, creating millions of well-paid jobs. A panel of inquiry set up by the Nigerian authorities to investigate the shooting of protesters in Lagos just over a year ago has submitted a damning report against the army and police. A leaked version of the report has appeared on the internet, as Mayeni Jones reports.
The report leaked on social media has no signature or date, but sources close to the inquiry confirmed to the BBC that it's the final version. The panel of inquiry, made up of legal professionals and activists, found evidence that soldiers shot and killed unarmed protesters on the night of the 20th of October. The report lists the names of 48 casualties, 11 of which are dead and 4 which are missing, presumed dead. The panel says that after the army retreated, police officers continued the violence and tried to clean up the scene by removing bullets. Eyewitnesses said that trucks carted away bodies.
The military government in Myanmar has said it will continue to deny UN human rights investigators access to the country because their comments have not been constructive. The UN has said it believes the oppression that has taken place since the army seized power in February pointed to crimes against humanity. The Deputy Information Minister, Major General Zaw Min Tun, told the BBC why they would not allow UN investigators in.
The reason we don't allow them in is because, number one, we consider it not the right time. 2, we can't agree with their demands. And number 3, what they say about Myanmar is not constructive.
The general acknowledged that hundreds of civilians had died, but denied allegations of systematic abuse of prisoners. BBC News. The president of Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, has announced that the armed forces and the police will from now on control security inside prisons, following a riot that left 68 inmates dead at the weekend. Prisoners from rival gangs used guns, machetes and grenades to attack each other before the authorities regained control of the Litoral Penitentiary in the city of Guayaquil. Rioting in the same prison in September led to the deaths of 119 inmates. The violence prompted President Lasso to declare a 60-day state of emergency. Police in Cuba have detained several high-profile opposition activists and prevented the organisers of a pro-democracy march from leaving their homes hours before the event was due to get underway. The demonstration was described by the government as a US-backed plot to overthrow the system, and they refused to authorise it. Videos on social media showed policemen, some in plain clothes, quickly silencing dissidents who had bypassed the restrictions. The Portuguese government has said it is considering making working from home mandatory again if coronavirus infections continue to rise. Portugal has one of the world's highest rates of COVID vaccine coverage, with 88% of the population fully immunised, but cases have been steadily rising. Paintings and sculptures by some of the most acclaimed artists of the 20th century have been sold at auction in New York. David Lewis reports.
All the pieces have been snapped up and hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent. Highlights of the Sotheby's auction include a Mark Rothko masterpiece, which sold for $82 million, and another by Jackson Pollock for $61 million. The works have come from the private collection of real estate mogul Harry Macklow and his ex-wife Linda. They've been subject of a legal dispute since their divorce, and they plan to split the money taken. A further sale of 30 works from the collection will take place in May next year.
BBC News.
And that's the news to the moment.
After a hard day's work, delicious comfort food is all we crave for. There at KFC, they've got you covered with a wide choice of delicious, finger-licking good meals from any of their 9 locations, including the Amazonia Mall at Providence. And there are 6 drive-through locations for your convenience. Their 11 herbs and spices are sure to blow those post-work vibes away every time. It's the perfect way to end a hard day. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
During the news, a recap of the highlights. The Guyana government has again found itself defending its track record to United States stakeholders. Police destroy more than $100 million worth of marijuana. In the region, a person of interest in the assassination of Haiti's President Jovenel Moïse has been arrested in Turkey. Internationally, police in Uganda say suicide bombers have targeted the Ugandan capital Kampala, killing at least 6 people and injuring more than 30 others. The news came to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken KFC.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.
The time in Guyana, 19 minutes after 6 or 18 hours 19. We now join the BBC World Service.
Spring, a much quieter countryside around us. The world around us will be much quieter and much poorer for the loss of birdsong around us. But we also know there are real signs of hope there. We know that for some of the rarer and scarcer birds, we have conservation actions, and that's backed up by European legislation, the EU Birds and Habitats Directives, that have really delivered recovery.
Professor Richard Gregory, and some lovely bird song, ending that report by Maria Elena Agostini. You've been listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service in London. It's coming up to 22:20 GMT.
Hello, I'm Andy Barwell with the latest world sport from the BBC. Coming up in the next 10 minutes, more World Cup qualifying in men's football. The Netherlands are through to next year's finals in Qatar. 4 nations are through to the last stage now of African qualifying. But we start with news that the former Yorkshire player Azim Rafiq says that English cricket is institutionally racist. He's told a UK government select committee that racist language is used constantly during his time at the club. Rafiq said it was an open secret that racism was widespread within the English game and that his life had been made hell for speaking out about it. Well, our sports news correspondent Laura Scott was listening to the evidence.
Azim Rafiq said today was the time for truths, and his testimony certainly made for uncomfortable listening, starting with how he and other Asian players were treated in the dressing room.
There was comments such as, "You lot sit over there near the toilets," elephant washers, the word used constantly, and there just seems to be an acceptance in the institution from the leaders, and no one ever stamped it out.
Rafiq